The Disney Renaissance kicked off in the late 1980s with a mix of younger artists and new heads of state at the Walt Disney Company. With an animated film out almost every year, Disney's name continued to stay in the limelight. As one film was dying down, the next big hit would come along, pushing the technology, the creativity, and even the physical bodies of the animation team. The powerhouse of the Disney locomotive was moving full steam ahead. But with the loss of three key names to the company, in Howard Ashman, Frank Wells, and Jeffrey Katzenberg, the train began to come off the rails. The first half of the Disney Renaissance saw a serious rise with great achievements, something that you can hear about in our previous video. But the second half of the Disney Renaissance isn't a story about the company crashing and burning. The Walt Disney Animation team continued to have success, but they'd never reached the heights of The Lion King. And in fact, they found a great story that connected with people in the follow-up to The Lion King, Pocahontas. Originally pitched by Mike Gabriel at what was known as the Gong Show pitch meeting, he gave a brief synopsis of his story of Pocahontas, caught between her family and the New English settlers. Feature Animation president Peter Snyder loved the idea, as he was looking to somehow bring a Romeo and Juliet-like story to Disney. Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was elated at the success of Beauty and the Beast, was also on board, as he thought Disney needed another romance film to be the follow-up to that Beauty and the Beast success. Katzenberg asked for the animals in the film to be mute, leaving the story to focus more on the mature and gentle relationship between Pocahontas and John Smith. The movie was heralded by the animators at the studio as a prestigious film, and animators were leaving The Lion King to work on Pocahontas. But the first signs of trouble may have come on the musical end of things. Alan Menken had been a longtime songwriter with lyricist Howard Ashman, and they had a great working relationship, but now without Ashman, Menken was asked to work with Stephen Schwartz. Frustrations rose between the two as Schwartz and Menken stepped on each other's toes, with Schwartz trying to change the music and Menken trying to change the lyrics. The story also became a hot topic as the team didn't know how much of the truth to the real Pocahontas they should stick to and how far they should lean into the Romeo and Juliet-like story. They did hire Native American actress Irene Boddard to voice their title character, and Native Americans were consulted on clothing and war dance scenes, but eventually, the animation team crew opted to veer the Pocahontas story more toward fiction. To replicate the marketing success of The Lion King, Disney pushed the Colors of the Wind song from the movie, keeping much of the story elements a secret. They also created what they called the Pocahontas Animation Discovery Adventure, a touring exhibit that made its way to many malls across the United States, showcasing interactive elements and real-life Disney animators giving guided tours. The premiere of the film was also made to be a big deal. Rather than a traditional Hollywood premiere, Disney opted to have the largest premiere in history at New York City's Central Park, with over 100,000 people in attendance, followed by a concert from Vanessa Williams, who would sing the then well-known marketing campaign song, Colors of the Wind. The film debuted on Pocahontas' 400th birthday in June of 1995, but the marketing and enthusiasm from the Disney team wouldn't amount to another movie trumping the last. While The Lion King had made over $400 million in the United States during its run, Pocahontas would only gross around $141 million. It was still a better number than many of the Disney films of the 1970s and 80s, but Michael Eisner and company saw Pocahontas as simply a disappointment. Critics shared the same feelings, with many saying it was their least favorite of the last few films, and that it just plodded along at times. It also competed with Disney's new distribution partner, Pixar, who made their debut film in 1995, and it would make over $100 million more worldwide than Pocahontas would. Disney would reap the benefits from Pixar's success due to distribution, but with the new animation studio making a more well-received film than Disney, the tides were slowly starting to turn. Katzenberg still wanted to replicate the success he had had previously and called Beauty and the Beast directors Gary Truesdale and Kirk Wise to head up the next film, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. At the request of Disney, the story was changed to emphasize more of a romance, with many of the characters lusting after the gypsy Esmeralda. Another change Disney requested was to downplay the religious aspect of Claude Frollo. However, the main setting was still the Cathedral of Notre Dame. For the Hunchback, animation was done in 3 different locations. Animation teams in California and Florida were joined by a new team in Paris. As all 3 teams worked together, they created one of Disney Animation's most mature animated films, focusing on sin, lust, love, and the idea of damnation. This move toward a more mature story would have worked had the marketing department understood what it was. To promote this movie, Disney aimed much of its marketing at a younger audience, even toddlers. What resulted from that was a serious controversy. The film would premiere at the Superdome in New Orleans to a sellout crowd, but the aftermath would see The Hunchback of Notre Dame never really find an audience. Jason Alexander, who voiced Hugo the Gargoyle in the film, stated that he would never take his 4-year-old to even see that movie. And even though President Peter Schneider urged that there was no controversy to be had, many parents saw the story as too violent and mature, resulting in the film only gaining $100 million in the United States. Hunchback of Notre Dame was seen once again as a bust, so the studio went back to less mature themes for their next film, Hercules. Seen as a chance to make a superhero movie, Ron Clements and John Musker attached themselves to Hercules, after Jeffrey Katzenberg had agreed they could eventually work on another film they wanted to make, about Treasure Island. Trying to capitalize on the success of Aladdin and veer more into comedy than drama and romance, Disney had high hopes for Hercules. Ron Clements and John Musker wrote the character of Phil with Danny DeVito in mind, who was convinced to take on the part, as well as writing Hades' minion Pain with Bobcat Goldthwait in mind. Adding comedic actors to the cast was done similarly to how Robin Williams and Gilbert Gottfried were added to Aladdin. The biggest difference for Hercules was a more wisecracking villain than Jafar ever was. After several people in Hollywood tried out to play Hades, it was James Woods who would bring a fast-talking car salesman approach to the villain that would make him one of the funniest bad guys in Disney history. On the musical side of things, director John Musker asked Alan Menken and new partner David Zippel to work in a gospel soundtrack, thinking the style of music would bring a fun and uplifting energy to the new film. The key to Hercules was to make the film as fun, comedic, and upbeat as possible. For the premiere of the film in New York City, an electrical light parade went through the streets, followed by a Disneyland-style fireworks show. Critics seeing the film did think it was a fun time, but it still didn't live up to the best of Disney's catalog. Audiences agreed, as the United States box office made less than $100 million, and globally, it barely made $250 million. It was another disappointing number for the Disney animation team, who projected the film would do much better. But while the team in California was disappointed, the team in Florida had been working on their own project, Mulan. The Florida animation team had been working consistently with scenes in other films or creating shorts on their own, but had yet to make their own full-length feature story themselves. Barry Cook, who had directed one of the Roger Rabbit shorts, was approached by Thomas Schumacher about taking on one of 2 projects, a Scottish tale about a dragon or a story based on the poem The Song of Fa Mulan. Cook opted to add a dragon to the Mulan story. Schumacher felt that that was the story to go with, and he added Hunchback of Notre Dame animator Tony Bancroft to the project as co-director with Cook. Originally thought to be simply a romantic comedy with cross-dressing, that idea was nixed when Peter Schneider and Thomas Schumacher saw footage of Mulan silently cutting off her hair and preparing to take her father's place. Roy Disney brought the idea of the character Mushu to the story and veteran artist Joe Grant added the cricket character, feeling that the story needed more comedy. For the voice talents, Disney wanted to lean toward having a mostly Asian cast, with the exception of the dragon Mushu. Disney felt that the success that Aladdin had with the genie still hadn't been duplicated, and Mushu could be a similar character. All they needed was a top A-list star for the role. Initially, turning down the offer to record at the Disney studio, Eddie Murphy agreed to be the voice of Mushu, but only if he was able to do so from his home in New Jersey. For Mulan, the Florida studio got an expansion that included a new 4-story building and an extra 400 animators for the team. Disney was excited to give the Florida team a chance to shine, and they put in a ton of effort. Artists worked to achieve a very Asian design, focusing on replicating Chinese watercolor paintings and pitting the story somewhere between the Ming and Qing dynasties to give it more of a timeless feel. Pocahontas and Hunchback songwriter Stephen Schwartz was originally attached to the project, but was convinced to leave Disney and join Jeffrey Katzenberg's new Dreamworks animation studio. Eventually, Matthew Wilder and David Zippel were added as the songwriting team, and Disney Channel star Christina Aguilera was asked to sing a version of the song Reflection, something that would jumpstart her music career outside of the Disney company. After the disappointing debuts for Pocahontas, Hunchback, and Hercules, Mulan's marketing was more reserved, with a premiere at the Hollywood Bowl Amphitheater. The movie's marketing actually served its box office numbers, with Mulan outperforming Hercules, making $340 million worldwide. However, the film could have done even better if it had not been met with controversy in America by feminist groups pointing out that the Disney film pokes fun at feminism rather than supporting strong female characters. And in China, the movie was met with a low turnout, as it was seen as too different from the original tale of the character, and the Chinese government held it back from a good release date and gave it a limited release as they wanted Chinese-made films to dominate the popular film times of 1998. Mulan's $340 million was impressive comparatively to the past few years, and would even beat out DreamWorks' animated film The Prince of Persia, but it would still get beat out by Pixar's second film, A Bug's Life, which made $363 million. Once again, Disney wasn't the top animation studio at the box office, being beaten out by their sister studio and distribution partner. And as the 1990s were coming to an end, Disney had one last chance to capitalize on the success they'd had in the 20th century, and they opted to swing for the fences as they tried to recapture the magic of the early part of the decade. They tried to do that with Tarzan. Kevin Lima, who had directed the Disney Toon Studios film A Goofy Movie, was asked by Jeffrey Katzenberg in the early 1990s to take on a Tarzan animated movie, after Thomas Schumacher thought it would make for a good animated film, as it could be a true representation of the book since Tarzan has to interact with the animal world. Katzenberg was uninterested in having the feature animation team do it though, and wanted a remote studio in Canada to take the project instead. But after Katzenberg left the Disney company, Michael Eisner was interested in having Kevin Lima and Chris Buck direct the film in-house. For voice roles, Tony Goldwyn was cast to play Tarzan after Lima felt that he had a strong animal sense. Glenn Close and Minnie Driver were added to the cast. Rosie O'Donnell was cast as a female Turk, and Woody Allen was cast as the elephant Tantor. But Allen, like Stephen Schwartz, was pulled away from the production by Jeffrey Katzenberg to work on DreamWorks' first computer-animated film, Ants. Wayne Knight, better known as Seinfeld's Newman character, took his place to voice the elephant instead. For Tarzan, production happened in California, Florida, and in Paris, with daily video conference calls helping to keep everyone in sync, especially when the character of Tarzan was mostly being drawn in Paris, while Jane was being drawn in California. Lead animator Glenn Keane saw many challenges with the production outside of the long-distance calls. For one, he wanted Tarzan to surf through the trees, as his son had gotten into skateboarding and extreme sports. To accomplish this, though, the backgrounds needed to evolve, and the computer animation that had been done on previous films needed to be developed even further. The animation team developed a program called Deep Canvas, which allowed the team to create 3D backgrounds that were big and broad and would hold place as the camera moved through the trees with the titular character. Another problem that Keen saw was the need to have Tarzan shirtless. Without clothing, the team had to have a good understanding of muscular structure to make Tarzan seem realistic, and as he moved, his muscles needed to move as well. The team in Paris studied anatomy in order to pull off Disney's first ever character to have working muscles. Musically, Kevin Lima didn't see the story as a musical, as he felt Tarzan breaking into songs on a tree branch would take people out of the story. But he was interested in the story having songs. Phil Collins was hired to write music for the film and to become a pseudo-narrator for the story, after having success with Elton John writing songs for The Lion King. Collins would end up writing all the songs for the film and became heavily involved, including redubbing his songs in 4 other languages for the soundtrack. Opting to continue to play things safe with film premieres, Tarzan opened at the El Capitan Theater, a theater that Disney had owned for years right across the street from the famous Chinese theater in Hollywood. The premiere was followed by a concert from Phil Collins and was met with great excitement. Tarzan was also the first feature film to be produced, mastered, and projected digitally, allowing Disney to play the film in many non-theaters, which included having a stint playing at Walt Disney World's Pleasure Island. Following the premiere, Tarzan began to gain buzz, with reviews coming in praising the leap forward in computer animation, the wonderful soundtrack, and the story being above what the last few Disney films had given the movie-going audiences. That buzz would pay off, as the movie would make $448 million worldwide, making it the most profitable Disney animated feature to be made since The Lion King came out 5 years earlier. It may have helped that in 1999, Disney didn't have competition from its sister animation company Pixar or its new Jeffrey Katzenberg rival Dreamworks Animation. But that would all begin to change, with both Pixar and Dreamworks now firmly gaining ground. As the 21st century neared, it became clear that the Disney company as a whole was starting to drift into a new direction, with Michael Eisner running the company alone instead of with a new partner after trying Michael Ovitz in the CEO role that Frank Wells once had. That new direction would ultimately lead the studio away from its formula of pushing hand-drawn animation to its limits with a musical format, moving into a new period of change and experimentation. If you want to know more about the history of Disney animation, be sure to check out our playlist dating all the way back to the beginning with Snow White. And if you haven't already, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for everything that's under the Disney umbrella. And as always, thank you for watching, and until next time, keep on moving, people.